So the year started off, and if you're wondering whether you should buy, sell, or continue to stay on the sidelines this 2026, this month's market update could be a game changer for you. In today's video, we're gonna break down Miami-Dade, Broward County, and Palm Beach, and we'll discuss how the condo and the single family home market is performing in each of the counties, so you can have a better perspective about what's going on in South Florida. And on top of that, we'll discuss some of the other things that might be influencing or affecting interest rates and what that could look like for the upcoming year regarding the market. If this is your first time here, I'm Juan Yarusi with Compass, your South Florida realtor, and every month we update you on the previous month's information. So we are going to be looking at the most up-to-date information available on Miami Realtors MLS, which is the numbers for November. If you want to stay up to date and you want to see what the December numbers ended up looking like, consider subscribing to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can stay up to date on what's going on. We will be updating you as soon as those numbers come up so that you can make the most informed decision for whatever it is that you are trying to achieve. But without further ado, let's jump in. So we're gonna start off with Miami-Dade in the single family home market and what the numbers looked like in the month of November 2025. So we see that the closed sales were 754 sales, which is actually up 5.3% versus last year. The percent of homes that were purchased using cash was 23.6%, which is actually slightly down about 5%. And the median sales price went up by 3.3%. It is now $671,250 versus last year's $650,000. So up about $21,000. Percent of original list price received, 94%. So in other words, buyers are getting about a 6% discount. And that is actually down 1% to last year. And the median time to contract is 46 days, which is an increase of about 28%. Last year, it was only taking 36 days for single family homes to go under contract. The active inventory is also up about roughly 16%, 15.8%. Regarding months of supply, there's about 6.5 months of inventory creeping into a buyer's market, but it's still a balanced market. The lower the number, the more in favor of sellers. The higher the number, the more in favor of buyers. So what does this mean for buyers? Well, we're seeing that more inventory is coming on the market, which means you have more options to choose from. And we're also seeing that with that, you also have more negotiating power, which is why we're seeing about 6% off of list price for the closed sales. Now, what does that mean for sellers? The good news is that price has continued to increase year over year. Slightly, it's 3.3% up versus last year. However, as more inventory comes on the market, you need to stand out. How do you do that? Condition, marketing, and pricing. Those are your three big key driving factors. So if you're thinking of going to market, make sure you speak with somebody that can help you in addressing all these three properly so that you're not a needle in the haystack and you can get the most money for your property in the shortest amount of time. Now, let's switch gears and look at the condo market in Miami-Dade. So the number of sales that happened for the month of November for Miami-Dade was 764 condos and townhomes that sold. That was actually down about 4%, a 3.8% decrease to last year. There was 49.9%, or about half, of all condo transactions that were purchased in cash. That was actually up 2.3% versus last year. And the median sales price actually decreased to $395,000 versus last year's $436,354. That's about a 10% decrease year over year for the median sales price for condo. And on average, sellers are getting about 93% of their original asking price. Essentially, buyers are getting about a 7% discount. That is actually also down 1% to last year. The median time to contract is 72 days, which is also up 44%. Last year, it took about 50 days for condos to go on the market and sell. Now it's taken about 72 days for it to go under contract. Keep in mind, once it goes under contract, it generally takes about 30 to 40 days for it to actually close, for the transaction to close. The active inventory is now 12,733 units available in Miami-Dade, which is actually up 12.5% to last year. And here's where you see the months of supply. There's 14.1 months of inventory available for buyers out in the market, which is a 27% increase to last year's. So what does this mean for condos? Well, here we are actually seeing that the prices are decreasing year over year. We have about a 10% decrease year over year. And there may be sectors of the market where this is perhaps not the case, but ultimately you're kind of stuck with all of this information and data, right? So as a buyer, you're looking at this and saying, hey, prices are falling, let's go shopping. Now as a buyer, here you have more options because over 14 months of inventory heavily favors you. Now, granted, there might be a lot of inventory in the market. Not everything is gonna suit your needs, but however, a seller doesn't know that. So use that to your advantage when negotiating yourself a good buy. For sellers, you definitely need to stand out. And again, driving factors are always gonna be pricing, condition, marketing. Position your home the best way possible. We are seeing that older condos are actually trading faster than newer condos. Actually, here we have a news article by Miami Realtors that's showing us that buildings that are 30 years or older are selling quicker than the newer ones. On average, 66 days versus 81 days for the newer condos. This is a great article and I'm gonna include it in the description below. So if you'd like to check it out for yourselves, feel free to head there and check it out after the video is done. But what is interesting is that they don't mention how that sector of the market is performing regarding pricing. In other words, they're not talking about if condos 30 years or older are taking the biggest discounts versus the newer condos. So keep that in mind. Now let's move on to Broward County single family homes. In the single family home market in Broward County, we had 918 sales, which is actually up 14.2% to last year. Paid in cash, about 21.9%, so about 22% of all sales were cash. That is a decrease of about 11%. However, the median sales price here surprisingly went down slightly, about 3.1% down to last year, with the median sales price now reflecting at $600,000 versus last year's $619,500. And the original percent of list price received was 95%. In other words, sellers got 95% of their asking price and buyers got 5% discounts, which is also down slightly at a 1%. The median time to contract went up. It's taking 55 days for properties to go under contract, which is a 30% increase to last year. And the active inventory is 5,179, which is a slight increase of 4.8% year over year. Here, the months of supply are a little more constrained. Only 5.2 months of inventory, which is a 6% increase to last year. However, it's still pretty much a balanced market. So what are the takeaways here for single family homes for buyers? Hey, we're starting to see price decreases year over year. You have more inventory coming on the market, about 6.1% more months of inventory and about 5% of active inventory, which is not a huge amount, but still use it in your favor whenever you are negotiating. However, don't drag your feet if you find something that you like. It's better that you put in an offer at what you're willing to pay for it once you look at the comps and make sure that at least you put your best foot forward and see if you can get yourself a good deal. And if not, at least you tried it and you can move on to other options. As a seller, again, price did come down slightly by a 3% discount, but we are still in that balanced market. Use that to your advantage. However, if you want to sell and you really want to sell, now more than ever, you should price it within reason. There's a lot of homes that are just sitting out there because people are not being realistic and their expectations are different. You can see that the numbers, that the tide has turned. So don't get caught in overpricing when you go to market and then having to reduce over time because it can hurt you in the end. Price strategically to begin with and put your best foot forward. Now let's talk about condos. As you may or may not know, Broward County has much less newer condos than Miami-Dade. In other words, there's a lot more inventory here that is 30 years and older than we have in Miami-Dade County. So, closed sales, 818 units sold, pretty much flat to last year. 52.6% of those sales were cash purchases, which was up about 6% to last year. The median sales price is $262,250, which is down 8% to last year. Last year was $285,000, and the original list price received was 92%. In other words, buyers are getting up to an 8% discount. which is down 1.5% to last year. And the median time to contract was 75 days. It's taking 75 days for the property to go under contract. That's actually up almost 30%, 29.3%. And the active inventory is 11,079 units in Broward County, up 7.6%, with the months of supply climbing up to 11.7 months, which is up about 19.4% to last year. Clearly a buyer's market. Now for buyers in the condo market in Broward County, similar to what you saw in Miami-Dade, you're seeing price coming down year over year. So it's important that you put, again, your best foot forward. You have more inventory to choose from, so do so strategically. If you're looking for these older condos, make sure you're looking at the condo docs, make sure you're looking at the milestone inspection, which are the new requirements from the state to make sure that the building is up to code. Don't necessarily discount an older building because it's older and all of this with assessments. There are some older buildings that have already done everything they needed to do, that are in compliance, that are up to date, that have gone through renovations, and those might be really good buys. You just really have to dig into the information. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Again, my information is in the description below or on the screen here. Feel free to call, text, or email, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding that. Palm Beach County single family homes. So for the month of November, Palm Beach County saw 1,001 transactions when it came to the single family home market, up 19% versus last year. 41.4 of those transactions were in cash. 41.4. If you've been paying attention to this video, you've seen that, and if you've been paying attention this whole year, you've been seeing that Dade and Broward County for single family home stays in that 20 to 25% of the market for cash purchases. But in Palm Beach, you're seeing 41% of those home sales paid in cash. The condo market is completely different. Condo market down in Broward and Dade is around 50, which is close to what it is for Palm Beach here. But single family, 41% is intense. Median sales price, $605,000. Pretty much flat, maybe a 1% increase to last year's $600,000. Dollar volume was almost $1 billion with $997 million sold in single family homes for the month of November. And the original list price received was 94%. So people say, oh, I have cash, I'm buying cash. About 40% of people that bought a home in November bought cash, and they're still only getting about 6% of a discount. So you gotta know the market. And the median time to contract was actually 41 days in Palm Beach County for the single family homes. That is up about 11% versus last year. Active inventory, 5,664, actually down about 3% versus last year in the single family home market. Months of supply here, a little tighter. As you can remember, Miami-Dade was about 6.5 and Broward was in the 5s. Here we're at 4.9 months of inventory, which is actually down 7.5% to last year. This is the only one of the counties where single family homes are less in terms of months of supply versus last year. So what does this mean for buyers in Palm Beach County? Well, you actually have a little bit less to choose from than you did about a year ago, and prices actually went up slightly. So even though you can get up to a 5 or a 6% discount, if you find the right home, don't drag your feet. Try to get it, try to go in. Keep in mind that about 41% of your competition is cash heavy. So if you're a cash buyer, you might be going up to somebody with a similar situation. And if you're financing, there's somebody that might have a little bit more negotiating power when it comes to that, because cash, whether we like it or not, is always king. And if you're a seller, you're in that 4.9 months. So it is sort of leaning towards the seller's market, but don't let that cloud your judgment. Make sure you're pricing within the range. And keep in mind that there are cash buyers out there. So if you're really looking to sell, this is one of the most favorable of the three markets in the single family home sector. Let's look at Palm Beach County townhomes and condos. In the month of November, we saw 705 closed transactions, 21% increase, basically 20.7. About 56.5 of those transactions were in cash, about roughly 57% of those transactions, slightly down to last year, 1%. The price of condos in Palm Beach is up 3.2%. 320,000 versus 310 last year. The percent of list price here was 92%. So buyers are getting about an 8% discount, slightly down 1%. And the median time to contract was 65 days. which is up 25% to last year. Again, interesting here, active inventory, 7,258, which is down 1.7%. Months of supply, under 10 months at least, 9.1 months of inventory, which is a 3.4% increase, which is not significant when you compare it to the other counties. And it does favor buyers, but again, when you compare it to Dade and Broward, the numbers are quite interesting. Remember at the bottom of the screen, you could always scroll back to Dade, Broward. There's timestamps, so it's easier for you to navigate if you wanted to revisit any of that at any point. So what does this mean for a condo buyer? Well, oddly enough, there is actually less active inventory than there was a year ago, but pricing has actually continued to increase here. And we are seeing that some buyers are getting up to an 8% discount here. So make sure that whoever you're working with, take the same prerequisites in vetting the building, taking a look at reserves for the building, where they are with their inspections, where they are with assessments, and any pending or upcoming. And again, I emphasize, don't let an older building discourage you. Some of these buildings that are older are in the best location with the best views because, let's face it, South Florida, everything that got built was built in front of the water basically first before we started to grow and kind of expand out west. So a lot of these older buildings have the best location and the best views. So as long as the building is up to date, they've gone through what they needed to do, you know what's upcoming, you understand the risk, or if there's nothing upcoming, what could potentially come in the future, and walk into things with both eyes open, you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, as we move forward, I want to touch on this new construction report that they've been putting together. For the information that we just went over, new condos or pre-construction sales are not factored in there. And those are the price points that are really changing the scenery of what pricing will ultimately be in the coming years. But when we're looking at this report, we see that new construction buyers, 52% of them are international buyers, and about 86% are international buyers. There's about 37 new construction projects with about 16,286 units under construction. That sounds like a lot, but if you watched my last video, and I'll link it up here for last quarter for ISG related, you'll see why that is not necessarily the case. Here's an interesting slide. Latin Americans are still the #1 buyer of Miami new construction. In West Palm Beach, 100% of international buyers for new construction were Latin Americans. Pompano Beach, 71%. Fort Lauderdale, 92%. Miami Beach, 75%. Wynwood, 74%. Downtown Miami, 97%. And Brickell, 77%. Coral Gables, 82%. The top countries that are buying new construction in South Florida, Colombia, about 23%. For those of you who don't know, I am Colombian myself. So when Latin America governments go left, the money goes north. So left-leaning countries, Mexico, as you can see on the chart here, Colombia is #1, Mexico #2. Argentina is #3, oddly enough, even though Milei is pro-capitalism. But we see Mexico, Brazil, and Colombia, and Chile topping the list. This chart is also interesting. It shows you Miami is still the #1 destination for New York buyers for the 6th consecutive year. New York, California, New Jersey, Georgia, Texas, and Illinois are consecutively year over year have been where most out-of-state buyers are coming from. And now that we talked about foreign migration to the States, let's talk about domestic migration to Miami-Dade, Broward. As New York continues to top the feeder state once again, out-of-state driver license exchanges in Miami-Dade rose 12% from last year. And Broward County driver's licenses exchanges were up 6% from last year. Everywhere else in Florida, those license exchanges actually went down. Okay, and as promised, we mentioned that we were going to talk about what's going on in the news or in government that might affect or play an influence on what is going to happen to the real estate market this upcoming year. And the first thing we have to talk about is that Governor Ron Desantis continues to mention and tease that they want to abolish homestead property taxes in South Florida. Now, that will be on a ballot in November of this year. And if they get 60% of voters to vote on that, that means they are potentially going to do away with property taxes in Florida. for primary residences. Let's do a quick example here. If you're gonna purchase a $600,000 home, which is the median sales price in Palm Beach and 605 in Broward County, right? Only Miami-Dade was a little bit above that. That's 671. But if you were purchasing a $600,000 home, depending on where you are, the millage rate, you are probably gonna be between 1.8 and 2% of your purchase price when it comes to property taxes. Let's go ahead and calculate on the high side for 2%. That means you're gonna be paying $12,000 per year for property taxes. And you break it down per month, thank goodness, it's easy math. It's $1,000 a month. So if all of a sudden your mortgage payment goes down by $1,000, what does that mean for most buyers? I have more buying power because I was calculating X amount and I have X amount available. So I can afford more house, so I can buy a bigger home. So if that happens, it may lead to continued price increases. If we saw something as what we were seeing in the condo market, for example, where we saw abundance of inventory, you're in a better place, right? You get maybe a better condo, then maybe the HOA dues are a little more palatable. It's easier for you to get your foot in the door. Let's look at Miami-Dade, for example. The single family homes are at $671,000. The median sales price for a condo is less than $400,000. That's a $270,000 difference. For a starter, a young family starting out, it makes a big impact when it comes to your monthly payment. And the second thing that is happening that is crucial for you to pay attention to is that Donald Trump has indeed directed or called for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to purchase $200 billion worth of mortgage bonds. Now, this should drive down mortgage rates. And as a matter of fact, the 10-year treasury actually dipped about 0.6% after this news was announced, and mortgage rates are closely tied to that 10-year treasury. So it is likely that those mortgage rates come down a bit. It remains to be seen whether all of this gets done, but this is definitely going to help some people get lower mortgages and into better payments. So all in all, the markets continue to be very diverse. As you see, all three counties have something going for them, whether you're a buyer or a seller, and they are closely related, but you do see some difference. Again, this is a very general and broad overview for you to keep in mind, but it is important that you keep this as an overall consensus and really start to narrow down into your community, your zip code, your area, your building, so you have a much better grasp on what is going on for what you're looking to do. So as always, thank you so much for sticking through to the end. I know this one was a little longer than usual, but there were some things that we definitely needed to touch on. And stick around for the upcoming update for December so you can contrast what's going on month after month. And again, anything you need, I'm happy to answer any questions, take a more in-depth and personalized approach for whatever you're looking for. My information is on the description below and on the screen here. Feel free to call, text, or email. And in the description, you can actually book a one-on-one time to speak with me directly and hear about what's going on with your case so we can definitely assist you in the best way possible. So thank you once again. My name is Juan Yarusi with Compass, your South Florida realtor. As always, continue to stay savvy, stay informed, stay ready, and I'll see you on the next one.